This is an everyday scene that can turn into a nightmare in an instant. A quiet street in São Paulo. A couple arriving to visit family, unaware that they were being watched. This is the story of a quick-thinking police officer, a big scare, and the constant dangers that lurk in the city's shadows. It was a common Saturday. A man was slowly parking the car, exactly at this spot. He was arriving to visit his mother, who lives in a housing complex nearby. Beside him, the passenger was preparing to get out. It was a moment of peace, a moment of transition, the most vulnerable instant for any driver. From across the street emerged two figures. They were watching the vehicle, the driver and the woman. They realized the car was parking and knew that was the moment. They were two bandits. One of them was a minor, an adolescent. In the blink of an eye, the two criminals crossed the street running. They approached quickly, already with weapons drawn. The victims were caught by surprise, trapped inside the vehicle, with no time to react. But fate, on this Saturday, was not on the side of the criminals. At that exact moment, while the bandits were running toward their targets, a black car approached. They had bad luck. Inside that black car was a military police officer who was in plain clothes. He was off duty, but he saw the chaotic scene unfolding. Two men, armed, advancing toward a civilian vehicle. He did not hesitate. The police officer stopped his car abruptly. He got out and drew his weapon in a quick movement. Now, he was positioned between the bandits and the victims. He gave the voice of arrest to the bandits. It was a clear order for them to stop and surrender. One of the bandits, the minor, was armed. The weapon was a simulacrum, a toy gun. But, in that moment of high tension, the police officer could not have known that. The adolescent made a serious mistake. He pointed it at the officer. The police officer was forced to make a decision in a fraction of a second to defend himself and the citizens. The officer then fires. Several shots were fired here at the location, echoing through the residential area. It was total chaos. One of the shots ended up hitting the light box, exactly there on the power box, leaving a clear mark of the violent confrontation. The young bandit, a 16-year-old adolescent, was injured. But, driven by adrenaline and panic, he did not fall. Even injured, he managed to run for a few blocks here in the region. The pursuit was underway. The injured adolescent desperately fled through the streets, looking for a place to hide. He tried to hide in a hairdresser's that is nearby, but it was too late. He was arrested. The minor was taken to a hospital right here in the south zone of São Paulo. He remains hospitalized, under police custody, recovering from the injuries. The second bandit, the accomplice, was luckier. In the confusion of the shooting, he managed to escape. He fled and disappeared in the surrounding streets. The accomplice remains at large. These two criminals had a bad outcome. They crossed paths with an off-duty military police officer who reacted, preventing a serious crime. The neighborhood is scared. The residents are very scared because robberies on this street are constant. Just 1 week ago, 2 robberies were carried out in less than 2 hours, on the same day. Motorcyclists arrive and rob the residents here in the region. This most recent incident highlights the constant battle against crime in the city. The action of the off-duty police officers saved the couple from being robbed. One adolescent is shot and hospitalized. His accomplice remains at large. But, for now, thanks to the bravery of one man, a robbery was prevented and the victims are safe. In São Paulo, a routine robbery turned into a case study on reaction, tactics, and the off-duty police officer's dilemma. In the heart of the North Zone, a neighborhood bakery was the scene of a property crime. The security cameras captured every second of the action, the invasion, the panic, and crucially, the exact moment the threat turned lethal. A suspect stormed the register and, before being neutralized, did what would become the point of no return, firing a shot into the air. What the assailant didn't know was that among the customers, an off-duty civil police officer, dressed in a simple green polo shirt, was observing, acting with extreme coolness, and was ready to respond. The scene revisits urban violence and the complex analysis of self-defense. When the assailant, wearing a helmet and backpack, enters the establishment and heads straight for the register. He holds the employee at gunpoint and demands the money. The images, captured from above, show the panic of the cashier, who is visibly nervous. The criminal's impatience peaks. He cocks the weapon, performing the slide rack to load the ammunition, and fires a shot upwards. This was not just a warning, but proof of the imminent threat of death. It is at this instant that the off-duty officer takes action. What is notable is the tactical precision. The agent does not approach from the front, where he could hit innocent people. He moves behind the assailant, using display gondolas, possibly for Easter eggs, as cover. A cold and calculated maneuver to protect the 3 people who were in line at the register. For the action to be legal, the use of necessary means must be moderate to repel an unjust aggression, whether current or imminent. In the context of the bakery, the assailant's initial shot transforms the threat into an imminent and active danger. The reaction, although lethal, is legally considered proportionate, as the lives of hostages and the officer's own life were at risk from a firearm. The inquiry's comments suggest that the police officer was careful, aiming to neutralize the assailant while protecting others. The law's objective is not vengeance, but rather to render the unjust aggressor incapable of doing harm. The officer's tactical decision, going behind the products to avoid crossfire, reinforces this analysis of moderation in the means used. One of the most shocking details of this case is the assailant's identity. The deceased suspect was a known customer of the bakery, a young man who had even taken a selfie there while having coffee. This revelation introduces an element of shock and desperation. The inevitable question is, how does a guy commit a robbery in the neighborhood he lives in? On the street he lives on? The familiarity with the location suggests that the target was not random, but rather calculated desperation. The suspect's death brings pain to the family. There are reports of the father arriving at the scene in a state of extreme suffering. The case, therefore, goes beyond the coldness of the penal code, becoming a tragedy with social and personal roots. The immediate victim of the crime, the cashier, ended up injured. The Public Security Secretariat confirms she was grazed or injured during the dynamic of the incident. However, the images show an important observation. The young woman injures her face and arm during the panic and reaction to the shot, repeatedly covering her face. This detail illustrates that the trauma of a violent robbery goes beyond the physical. The mere act of seeing imminent death already causes severe damage. Even injured, she is forced to continue handing over the money, displaying an evasive behavior caused by panic. The location in Jasana, North Zone, places the case in the context of the vulnerability of neighborhood commerce. Bakeries, mini-markets, and pharmacies continue to be easy and recurring targets due to the flow of cash and low armed security, fueling the perception of insecurity, even if the general robbery rate falls in São Paulo. The scene at the bakery in São Paulo's North Zone will be remembered not only for the tragic outcome, but for the demonstration of tactical readiness in a civilian environment. A police officer, fulfilling his duty even while off duty, acted to protect the lives of others, forcing the interruption of an escalation of violence that began with a warning shot. The case exposes the chasm between the criminal's desperation, who was a customer of the location, and the state's obligation, represented by a single plainclothes agent. Society faces the dilemma: to what extent is individual intervention the only effective barrier against violent crime, and what is the human cost of this constant vigilance? The law protects the police officer, but the scene affects everyone. The inquiry continues. Life at the bakery will never be the same. What did you think of the police officer's action? Was it correct?